Have you ever wondered why the silence after an avoidant person leaves feels louder than every conversation you ever had with them? Why the phone suddenly becomes the center of your attention? Why every notification makes your heart race, even when you tell yourself you are done waiting? And why, even after deciding not to reach out, it feels as if your own mind has declared war on you? Most people believe that when two people stop talking, nothing is happening. They think silence means the story has ended, but psychology tells a different story. Silence is rarely empty. It is one of the most powerful emotional experiences two people can share, especially when one of them has an avoidant attachment style. The moment communication stops, something begins to move beneath the surface. It is invisible, but it is real. It changes thoughts, it changes emotions, it changes the way both people see themselves and each other. If you stay until the end of this video, you will understand what truly happens inside the mind of an avoidant during silence, what happens inside your own mind at the same time, and why this period can either become the reason you lose yourself or the moment you become stronger than you have ever been. Once you understand these psychological shifts, you will stop fearing silence and start seeing it as a turning point instead of a punishment. The first days without communication are rarely peaceful. They are confusing. Your mind immediately begins searching for answers that do not exist. You replay conversations. You question your decisions. You remember small moments that once felt ordinary but now seem incredibly important. Every memory suddenly carries more emotional weight than it did before. The human brain dislikes uncertainty. It would rather believe a painful story than accept having no story at all. That is why silence often feels unbearable. Your imagination starts filling every empty space with fear, doubt, and endless possibilities. This is where many people make the biggest mistake. They believe the discomfort means they must act immediately. They convince themselves that one more message will bring clarity. One more explanation will fix everything. One more chance will change the outcome. But what they are really trying to escape is not the silence between two people. They are trying to escape the discomfort inside themselves. That discomfort reveals something important. It shows how much of your emotional stability has become connected to someone else's attention. When their messages disappear, your sense of security disappears with them. Suddenly, your peace depends on whether another person decides to respond. Your confidence depends on whether another person remembers you. Your happiness depends on something completely outside your control. Think about how much power that gives away. The hardest truth is that silence does not create emotional dependence. It exposes it. What was already hidden inside becomes impossible to ignore. Many people mistake this emotional pain as proof that they have found true love. But intense emotional discomfort is not always love. Sometimes it is fear. Sometimes it is attachment. Sometimes it is the deep anxiety of losing the version of yourself that only existed because someone else kept validating it. This is why silence feels different depending on who you are. One person sees silence as rejection, another sees it as space to breathe, another sees it as an opportunity to grow. The event is the same. The meaning changes because the mind creates the emotional experience, not the silence itself. An avoidant often responds to emotional intensity by creating distance, not because they always stop caring, but because closeness can feel overwhelming to them. Distance becomes their way of reducing internal pressure. At the same time, the other person usually experiences that distance as abandonment. This creates a painful cycle. One person moves away to feel safe. The other moves closer to feel safe. Both are searching for security, yet their strategies pull them further apart. The moment communication stops, that cycle is interrupted. For the first time, both people are left alone with themselves. No more constant reassurance, no more emotional chasing, no more immediate reactions, just silence. And silence has an unusual way of revealing truths that constant conversation keeps hidden. Without new messages to analyze, your attention slowly turns inward. Questions begin to change. At first you ask, why aren't they talking to me? Later, another question quietly appears. Why am I allowing someone else's silence to control my entire emotional state? That question changes everything. Because the real battle is no longer about getting another person's attention. It becomes about reclaiming your own attention. Human psychology teaches us something fascinating. Whatever we chase begins to control us. The more desperately we seek certainty from someone else, the more uncertain we become inside ourselves. Every unanswered message increases emotional tension. Every imagined scenario steals more mental energy. Without realizing it, your entire day starts revolving around someone who is not even present. That is how emotional dependence grows. Not through dramatic moments, but through repeated habits of seeking validation outside yourself. Yet there is another possibility. What if this silence is not happening to destroy you? What if it is happening to separate you from the version of yourself that constantly begged for certainty? What if this uncomfortable season is exposing the emotional habits that have quietly been limiting your confidence for years? Growth almost never feels comfortable in the beginning. It feels empty. It feels unfamiliar. It feels like something important has been taken away. But sometimes what disappears is not your happiness. It is the illusion that your happiness could only exist in someone else's hands. The silence between you and the avoidant is not simply the absence of words. It is the beginning of a psychological test, a test that quietly asks one powerful question. Will you continue chasing what keeps running away? Or will you finally become the kind of person whose peace no longer depends on being chased back? The answer to that question will shape everything that happens next, because while you believe nothing is happening during silence, both minds are beginning to change in ways that most people never notice until it is far too late. The longer the silence continues, the more something unexpected begins to happen. The focus slowly shifts away from the missing conversation and toward the hidden patterns that existed long before the relationship reached this point. What once seemed like a story about another person's behavior gradually becomes a story about your own emotional foundation. This is the stage that most people misunderstand because they are still looking outward for answers, while the real transformation is waiting inward. At first, it may seem as though the avoidant has moved on without a second thought. They appear calm. They stay quiet. They do not reach out. From the outside, it can look like they are completely unaffected. But human behavior is rarely that simple. People process emotions in different ways. Some experience everything immediately. Others keep themselves busy, distract their minds, and delay emotional processing until much later. Silence does not automatically mean someone feels nothing. It often means they are managing feelings in the only way they know. This is why appearances can be misleading. A lack of communication should never be mistaken for a lack of internal experience. Many people confuse visible action with emotional reality. They assume that because they cannot see someone struggle, there is no struggle at all. Yet the human mind has an incredible ability to hide discomfort behind routines, work, hobbies, or endless distractions. What remains unseen is often far more powerful than what is visible. While this is happening, your own emotional world is also changing. The first wave of panic slowly loses its strength. The constant urge to check your phone begins to fade. Thoughts that once arrived every minute start appearing less often. This does not happen because you suddenly stop caring. It happens because the brain cannot stay in a state of emotional emergency forever. Eventually, it begins searching for balance again. That moment is important because it marks the beginning of emotional recovery. Not recovery from another person, but recovery from the belief that your peace depends on another person's decisions. There is a difference between missing someone and losing yourself because of their absence. Many people spend years confusing those two experiences. As your emotions become less chaotic, your perspective starts changing. You remember moments that you ignored before. You notice situations where you accepted less than you deserved. You recognize conversations where you remained silent just to avoid conflict. You begin seeing how often you sacrificed your own needs to keep someone else comfortable. These realizations do not arrive all at once. They come quietly, one after another, until the picture becomes impossible to ignore. This is where personal strength begins, not through forcing yourself to stop caring, but through seeing reality with greater honesty. Emotional maturity is not pretending that nothing hurts. It is understanding that pain can become a teacher instead of a prison. Every difficult experience carries information. The question is whether you are willing to learn from it or continue repeating it. There is another psychological shift taking place during this period. The emotional value of constant availability starts to change. When someone is always chasing approval, they unknowingly teach themselves that they are not enough on their own. Every attempt to gain reassurance reinforces the fear of being abandoned. But when that pattern finally stops, even for a short time, something powerful begins to grow. Self-respect slowly replaces desperation. Confidence is not created by hearing the words you hoped someone would say. It grows each time you prove to yourself that you can survive what you once believed would break you. Every day that you continue moving forward without seeking permission from someone else strengthens a part of you that had been waiting to awaken. Ironically, this inner change often alters the entire emotional dynamic. The energy that once pushed people apart begins disappearing because the need to chase is no longer controlling your decisions. Instead of reacting from fear, you begin responding with clarity. Instead of measuring your value through another person's attention, you begin measuring it through your own actions, discipline, and growth. People are naturally drawn toward emotional stability. They notice when someone no longer carries the same pressure, the same anxiety, or the same constant need for reassurance. Real strength has a quiet presence. It does not announce itself, it simply exists. It is built through patience, self-control, and the willingness to remain grounded even when circumstances feel uncertain. Many individuals believe that the goal of silence is to make the other person miss them, but that way of thinking keeps your attention trapped in the same cycle. It still places your future in someone else's hands. A healthier question is completely different. Instead of asking whether they are thinking about you, ask whether you are becoming someone who no longer needs external validation to feel complete. That single change in perspective creates enormous freedom. Your emotional life stops revolving around unpredictable responses. Your days become guided by purpose instead of waiting. You invest energy into your own health, your own goals, your own discipline, and your own future. The absence that once felt unbearable slowly becomes the space where a stronger identity is formed. This does not mean every memory disappears. Certain moments will still return unexpectedly. A familiar place, a meaningful song, or an ordinary routine may remind you of what once existed. That is completely natural. Healing is not the removal of every emotion. It is the ability to experience those emotions without allowing them to control your direction. One of the greatest psychological victories is realizing that closure is not always something another person gives you. Sometimes, closure is created by the choices you make every single day. It is built when your actions become more powerful than your unanswered questions. It grows each time you refuse to let uncertainty decide your worth. As this process continues, something remarkable begins happening beneath the surface. The silence that once felt like a punishment starts becoming a source of wisdom. You discover qualities within yourself that constant emotional struggle never allowed you to see. Patience becomes stronger. Self-awareness becomes sharper. Emotional discipline becomes part of your character rather than something you have to force. Without realizing it, you are preparing for the next stage. This is the point where the silence is no longer changing only you. It is also creating conditions that can reshape the entire connection itself. Whether the path leads toward reunion or permanent separation, neither outcome will carry the same meaning as before because you will no longer be standing in the same emotional place where this journey began. Time has a unique way of revealing what emotions often hide. After enough distance has passed, the situation reaches a point where neither person is reacting only to the absence anymore. Instead, each begins facing the consequences of the habits they carried into the relationship. This is the stage where temporary feelings lose their influence and deeper truths begin to surface. It is also the point where many outcomes become very different from what people expected when the silence first began. For someone with avoidant tendencies, creating distance can initially bring a sense of relief. The pressure feels lower. Difficult conversations are no longer waiting. Emotional demands seem quieter. Daily life appears easier because the source of tension has been removed. But relief and resolution are not the same thing. Escaping discomfort does not automatically solve the reasons it existed. It only postpones facing them. As life returns to its normal rhythm, the mind naturally begins organizing past experiences. Small memories appear without warning. A familiar routine brings back an old conversation. An ordinary place reminds them of a shared moment. The absence that once felt comfortable slowly becomes more noticeable because there is no longer constant emotional noise covering it. When everything becomes quiet, the mind has room to reflect. Reflection is very different from reaction. A reaction happens quickly. Reflection takes patience. It examines choices, patterns, and missed opportunities with greater honesty. During this process, people sometimes recognize things they could not see while emotions were running high. They begin asking themselves difficult questions about what was lost, what could have been handled differently, and what role they played in the outcome. At the same time, your own life has been moving forward. You are no longer counting every passing hour. Your attention is no longer trapped inside endless assumptions. Instead, your energy has gradually been redirected toward building something solid within yourself. New routines replace old habits. Goals become clearer. Your confidence starts coming from your actions instead of unpredictable emotional responses. This inner shift creates something valuable that cannot be borrowed from anyone else. It creates emotional independence. Independence does not mean becoming cold or refusing to care about others. It means caring without abandoning yourself. It means being able to love while still protecting your peace. It means understanding that your identity remains steady whether someone stays or walks away. Many people spend years searching for relationships that will finally make them feel complete. But completeness is not something another person delivers. A healthy connection adds joy to an already stable life. It should not become the only source of purpose. The moment another person's choices become the foundation of your identity, fear begins controlling every decision. Real confidence grows from knowing who you are before anyone else decides how they feel about you. This is why silence can become one of life's greatest teachers. It removes distractions, it strips away illusions, it forces you to examine where your emotional security truly comes from. Some discover that they had been ignoring their own dreams while trying to hold on to someone else's attention. Others realized they had forgotten the hobbies, friendships, ambitions, and personal growth that once gave their lives meaning. What seemed like an ending slowly becomes an invitation to rebuild a stronger future. There's another change that often surprises people. As your emotional balance becomes stronger, your conversations with yourself begin changing as well. Instead of asking, "Why wasn't I enough?" you begin asking, "What kind of life do I want to create from this point forward?" That single question redirects your focus toward possibility instead of regret. It replaces helplessness with responsibility. Responsibility is powerful because it returns control to your own hands. You cannot rewrite another person's decisions. You cannot force emotional readiness. You cannot make someone choose growth before they are willing, but you can decide how this experience shapes your character. Every challenge presents two paths. One leads toward bitterness, the other leads toward wisdom. Both begin with the same pain, but they end in completely different places. People often underestimate how attractive genuine self-respect becomes over time. It is not loud. It does not seek attention. It is reflected in consistent actions, healthy boundaries, calm responses, and the ability to remain grounded when life becomes uncertain. Those qualities cannot be created overnight. They are developed through moments exactly like this, when circumstances invite you to react emotionally, yet you choose to respond with patience instead. Sometimes, after a long period apart, communication begins again. Sometimes it never does. Both possibilities exist. What matters most is not predicting which outcome will happen. The greater question is whether you will be the same person if that day arrives. Imagine receiving a message after months of growth. If your emotional world still depends entirely on that single notification, then nothing has truly changed. The calendar moved forward, but your mindset remained in the same place. However, if you have built confidence, purpose, discipline, and inner stability, then the situation becomes completely different. You are no longer responding from fear of losing someone. You are responding from clarity about what truly belongs in your life. That difference changes everything. Decisions become healthier because they are no longer driven by desperation. You stop accepting treatment that conflicts with your values simply because you fear being alone. You recognize that loneliness and peace are not the same experience. A peaceful life without constant emotional confusion is often healthier than a relationship built on uncertainty and repeated emotional exhaustion. One of the strongest signs of personal growth is reaching the point where you no longer need every unanswered question to receive an explanation. You understand that not every chapter closes with perfect clarity. Some lessons arrive through acceptance rather than conversation. The need to understand every detail slowly fades because your future becomes more important than revisiting the past. As this transformation continues, something remarkable becomes clear. The silence was never simply about two people who stopped speaking. It became the environment where hidden beliefs were challenged, emotional habits were replaced, and a stronger version of yourself quietly began to emerge. Now the journey reaches its final stage, where the greatest discovery is not whether the avoidant returns, but what kind of person you have become because you finally stopped allowing silence to define your worth. The final lesson is not found in whether another message ever arrives. It is found in the person you become while waiting no longer controls your life. That is the hidden destination of this entire experience. What first looked like an emotional setback gradually reveals itself as a chance to build a life that is no longer dependent on uncertain outcomes. The greatest victory is not getting someone's attention back, it is getting your own future back. There comes a moment when you notice something unusual. The emotional weight you carried for so long no longer feels as heavy. The memories still exist, but they no longer decide your mood. Certain dates pass without the same sadness. Familiar places lose their power over your thoughts. You wake up thinking about your plans instead of wondering what someone else is thinking. These changes happen quietly. There is no dramatic announcement. They simply become part of who you are. This is how genuine transformation works. It is built through small choices repeated over time. Choosing discipline instead of obsession, choosing self-respect instead of chasing approval, choosing progress instead of remaining trapped in yesterday. Every healthy decision becomes another brick in the foundation of a stronger identity. Eventually, the version of you that once lived in constant emotional uncertainty begins to feel like a distant memory. One of the greatest misconceptions about difficult endings is believing they only take something away. In reality, they also make room for something new. They create space for better habits, clearer thinking, healthier boundaries, and deeper confidence. Holding on to what no longer serves your growth often prevents you from discovering what your life is capable of becoming. Sometimes the closed door is not blocking your future, it is protecting it. Human psychology shows that people naturally adapt to new realities. At first, change feels uncomfortable because the mind prefers familiar patterns, even unhealthy ones. But with enough time and consistent effort, what once felt impossible gradually becomes normal. The silence that originally seemed unbearable eventually becomes ordinary. Then it becomes peaceful. Finally, it becomes something you rarely think about because your attention has found more meaningful places to rest. During this journey, you also begin recognizing a truth that many people overlook. Love without emotional security creates confusion. Affection without consistency creates anxiety. Interest without healthy communication creates endless guessing. Lasting relationships are not built only on feelings. They are built on trust, respect, accountability, and the willingness of both people to grow. Without those qualities, even the strongest emotions struggle to create lasting stability. This realization changes the standards you set for your future. You stop measuring a relationship by how intense it feels in the beginning. Instead, you value reliability, honesty, emotional maturity, and mutual effort. You no longer confuse unpredictability with excitement. You no longer mistake emotional highs and lows for deep connection. Peace becomes more attractive than emotional chaos because you understand its true value. If someone eventually chooses to reconnect, you meet that moment with a completely different mindset. You are no longer searching for someone to rescue your happiness because your happiness has already found stronger roots. You listen carefully. You observe actions more than promises. You recognize that meaningful change is demonstrated through consistent behavior, not through temporary emotions or beautiful words. This allows you to make decisions from wisdom instead of longing. If communication never returns, your life continues moving with purpose. You no longer see that outcome as proof of failure. Every experience, whether joyful or painful, leaves behind knowledge that shapes your future. The relationship may have ended, but the lessons continue creating value for years to come. They influence the way you trust, the way you communicate, the way you protect your well-being, and the way you choose the people who deserve a place in your life. Think about the person you were when this period first began. Fear often guided your thoughts. Uncertainty consumed your attention. You searched for signs, explanations, and reassurance. Now compare that version with the person standing here today. You understand your emotions more clearly. You have learned the importance of healthy limits. You know that your worth cannot be measured by another person's availability. Those are not small achievements. They are life-changing discoveries. Many people spend years waiting for external circumstances to transform them. They hope the perfect relationship, the perfect opportunity, or the perfect moment will finally make them feel whole. But lasting strength grows from the inside first. The outer world often changes only after the inner world has changed. When your character becomes stronger, your choices become wiser. Better choices lead to healthier relationships, greater peace, and a more meaningful life. There is a powerful freedom in accepting what you cannot control while fully committing yourself to what you can. You cannot control another person's emotional readiness. You cannot force understanding. You cannot create commitment through persistence alone. But you can strengthen your habits. You can develop patience. You can protect your dignity. You can continue growing even when circumstances refuse to cooperate. That is where real power lives. Every difficult season asks the same question in a different form. Will this experience define your limits, or will it reveal your potential? The answer is written through your daily actions, not your temporary emotions. Every morning, you choose hope over resentment. Every evening, you choose gratitude over regret. Every step forward becomes evidence that your future is no longer being written by your past. The silence that once frightened you has completed its purpose. It exposed hidden fears, challenged old beliefs, and invited you to discover strength that had been buried beneath emotional dependence. What remains now is not emptiness but clarity, not weakness but resilience, not waiting but direction. From this point on, remember one truth whenever life places you in another season of uncertainty. Never allow another person's absence to become the measure of your value. Your purpose does not disappear because someone walks away. Your potential does not fade because a chapter closes. The strongest version of yourself is not created when everything goes according to plan. It is created when you choose growth in moments that tempt you to give up. And when you keep making that choice again and again, you eventually realize that the greatest thing that happened during the silence was never what changed inside the avoidant. It was everything that changed inside you.